Do you have the gift of gab and like talking about interesting topics? Are you often called opinionated by your friends and family? Then come to Anchor where you can be all of the above and get paid for it. Along with being one of the easiest systems to create contact with, Anchor supplies everything you need and can be used from your smartphone or computer. They even distribute your content for you so that you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hello, Anjanette speakers. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and this is post 7 out of my series, 29 Days of Black Feminism. So today today's subject, the last time I talked with you guys, which would be the last post, I talked about how many times in the fight for equal rights, especially for Black women, that often our fight would not just be feminism, but we also dealt with the issue of intersectionality. So many times the fight for equal rights as women would often intersect with the fight for civil rights as Black people. And the lady that I'm going to talk about today is a perfect example of that. In fact, over the next few days, I'm going to, talk about a few people who may not have been, that were feminists, but also did a great deal of work in the civil rights movement. So today I'm going to talk about Angela Y. Davis. So, as you know, most of y'all have seen pictures back in the day, and most of us are old enough to remember. Most of us think of Angela Davis and we see her iconic big afro, the Black Power salute, and different other things. But she was a very controversial figure. Now, she was a part of what I call second wave feminism, and she's a contemporary of Gloria Steinem and Dorothy Pittman Hughes. So they were second wave, while Sojourner Truth would have been part of first wave because that was the fight for the right to vote. And, Feminista Jones, Chimamanda Adichie, and Kimberly and Foster would be considered to be third and fourth wave feminism. And like I said, I think the next couple of posts are going to be dedicated to talking about feminism and about Black feminism. So Angela Davis was maybe a very big figure in that, and most of the time, like I said, many people don't think of her as feminist. Many people associate her with the civil rights movement, but she was actually a very strong figure. As a matter of fact, many women who were associated with the Black Panther Party, also had very strong leanings when it came to feminism. So they were integral in the fight for women's rights as well. So Angela Davis was born Angela Yvonne Davis, that's what the Y is for, January 27th, 1944 in Birmingham, Alabama. She is a American political activist, philosopher, academic, and author. She is a professor emerita. Emerita is a title that is given to professionals who want to stay active in scholarship following retirement. So she's actually a retired professor, but she, maintains her activity. And this is at University of California, Santa Cruz. So she is a Marxist, and she was a Marxist. Marxism is the economic, social, political worldview that is based on the works of Karl Marx. So now the information that I'm giving you, like I said, is courtesy of Wikipedia, which means if you want to look her up in Wikipedia and click on some of these links, you can get a little more detail about some of this. For time constraints, I'm going to give you the condensed version. So she was a communist until 1991. And you have to understand when I tell you the rest of what I'm telling you, because at one point you could be fired and blacklisted for being a communist. And, black communists do exist. Okay, it was not uncommon during that time period for a lot of young people, and especially, in response to the injustices and unfairness in this country, for many of them to have adopted communism as a belief system. And so, in 1991, she was a communist until 1991. So 1991, a few things happened. One thing was the falling apart of the communism as a whole. The Soviet Union was disbanded or whatever. So that particular belief was no longer, and I'll get into more details later on in this post. So in 1991, she joined the Breakaway Committee of the Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism. She is the author of over 10 books on class, feminism, and the United States prison system. She studied French at Brandy University and philosophy at the University of Frankfurt in West Germany. She studied under Herbert Marcuse, who is a prominent figure in the Frankfurt School of Marxism, and this allowed her to become increasingly interested in far-left politics. So she was more left. She earned her doctorate at the Humboldt University of Berlin. During her time with the Communist Party, Ms. Davis was involved herself in a wide range of leftist causes. She was involved in second wave feminism. Remember, I said this was, around the time second wave feminism. The first post that I put, contained another person who was a part of second wave feminism. The Black Panther Party, and the campaign against the Vietnam War, which the Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975, so it was a 20-year war. She worked as the acting assistant professor. She worked as an acting assistant professor of philosophy at UCLA. This was in 1969. Shortly after she got hired, she was fired for being a communist. They found out about her communist party leanings, and she was fired. A court ruled this illegal, so she was fired again for use of inflammatory language in 3 of her speeches. So it was one of those cases of, okay, we couldn't get you for that, so we're going to go and find another reason to get you. Now, keep in mind that while she was going through all this, people who participated in the fight for feminism, fight for equal rights for women, and for black people's civil rights were investigated heavily by our government. And it was not uncommon for them to be threatened, their lives to be threatened. And it was not uncommon for a person's job prospects to be threatened either. So they went through some things. If you've ever seen like old signs of Free Angela Davis, I'm about to give you a explanation as to why those signs exist. So at one point she purchased firearms for people who used them in an arms takeover of a courtroom in Marin County, California, in which during this takeover 4 people were killed. So if you want more details on this, the name of the guys who were participating in this were called the Soledad brothers. So as I looked more into more detail in this story, she was in jail. She was in prison for over a year and a half. but for her, her participation because she purchased guns, and those guns wound up being used. And if you've ever heard any high profile, cases like this, as soon, that if they injure anybody, if somebody's injured, like say if you rob a store and during the course of the robbery, you shoot someone. Well, and say the person goes to the hospital and they die. Well, when they die, your case is already automatically uploaded to murder or upgraded to murder. And it's usually a case of how well your representative your lawyer or whatever can get your case to be lowered. So I remember telling someone, I'm like, well, conspiracy to commit a crime is a crime in and of itself. So they were getting her for conspiracy to murder was the charge that they gave her. So you remember Snoop Dogg at one point talked in his song about murder was the case that they gave me. Okay, so here you are being given this case. So she was there for about a year and a half. She was acquitted of the charges in 1972. So finally, they acquitted her because just because you purchase guns for someone doesn't mean that they're planning on killing someone. And it doesn't sound like the deaths were probably planned. Now, if you want more details, now this particular, quite a few artists wrote songs dedicated to her during this period. One was John Lennon, and he and Yoko Ono penned a song called Angela. So she was a very pivotal figure. She was a professor of ethnic studies at San Francisco State University. Much of her work there was focused on the abolition of prisons. She co-founded an organization called Critical Resistance. It's an organization that works to abolish the prison industrial complex. So the prison industrial complex is basically prison for profit. It's an attribution of the U.S.'s high incarceration rate for profit. So people don't realize that prisons make money. They make money off of the amount of inmates that they get money. I think some of them may even get money from, the government for however many people that they're housing. So they get paid for that. They're paid for the people that they, a certain amount of commerce is attached to that. So when you, just like one of those issues of one hand washing the other, and I'm not saying this, so I apologize for any toes that get stepped on, really, but not really, free speech. Prisons make money. They make money off of how many people they get in there. And if a prison is corrupt, and some of them are, when you see politicians, I did a paper for a class in criminal justice, and I talked about the whole, castle law, commonly known as the stand your ground law, and how many states have them, and it's supposed to be a form of self-defense. What people don't realize is that when laws get passed, there's usually someone lobbying to get that law passed. And it has ties to the gun lobby. So it has ties to the gun lobby, those who support, freedom to carry arms or whatever. It has ties to the gun lobby. The gun lobby had a hand in getting the law passed. And the problem is many people, use the stand your ground as vigilante justice. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is because that's kind of how it is with prison complexes, where there are people who have a vested interest because that's how they make their money. So when you hear, people that are pushing for stiffer sentences, and we can't have these criminals around our children, and what they call Willie Horton type campaigns, they're not doing that on purpose. That's why I'm like, no, I don't want Donald Trump any longer than I have to have him. Because, people don't realize their significance. If somebody is white and male and they're aligning themselves with white supremacists, why do you even want to? I don't care how born again they say they are. I've said for years, I kept saying for years, the KKK are not Christian. Stop, as a black person, associating them with Christianity, because they're not born again. I sat here and watched an episode of Roland Martin where he completely humiliated this white supremacist because he said, do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Which tells me that somebody did their homework and actually read a Bible and saw what it takes to make you a Christian, and asked this guy, do you meet the standards of righteousness? Do you meet what it takes to be a born-again Christian in the first place? And this guy couldn't give him a straight answer. And I had said, they're not born-again Christians. I've known there have been testimonies of people who used to be white supremacists that were born-again Christians. And guess what? Once they really truly gave their life to Christ, they abandoned white supremacy. So they couldn't do it. Anyway, back to, our topic, which is not getting kind of semi-leaving my soapbox. She at one point was the Communist Party's candidate for vice president during the 1980s, and this happened twice. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, she left the Communist Party and joined, the party that I talked about earlier, CCDS, the breakaway group. She joined the Feminist Studies Department at University of California in Santa Cruz, where she became department director before retiring in 2008. She continues to remain active in movements like Occupy. If you remember, I think her early part of the millennium, Occupy was the international branch of the group Occupy Wall Street that was protesting against social and economic inequality around the world. She's also participated in boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS. Now, this is a Palestinian-led campaign promoting various forms of boycott against Israel until it meets the campaign's described as their obligations under international law. Now, international law is a term that has to do with regulations governing international relations. So there are there's local laws, there's state laws, there's national law, meaning here federal law. There we go, federal law, and then there's international law, which is and many times human rights abuses such as forced marriages and different things like that come under international law, because people will take people across national lines, across different types of lines to try to avoid prosecution. So if you want more details on her participation in boycott, divest, and sanctions, you can get that in Wikipedia as well. I think she also had, some movement in the South African, not play South African or whatever, again, anti-apartheid. So, as I said before, she is part of what I call second wave feminism. Now, of course, like I said, because we're talking about, being time sensitive, I'm trying not to go over 20-30 minutes in each of these posts because I don't want to wear you out. But I also recommend that you go to Wikipedia if you want to read her whole story. She is a very controversial figure because it really depends on how you feel about, especially, any criminal activity, because you have to understand that many times at that time period, people were fighting for rights. Things were not equal. It was perfectly legal to do a whole lot of really messed up stuff to people if they didn't fit the status quo as far as the color of their skin or their gender or biological sex. So it was a whole lot of stuff that it was perfectly legal to do. On one of our Black History Month, I may cover the Black Panther Party, because they had several. And I may even pick, and for this month, I may even pick a couple of more females a couple of more women out of that movement to show you, like I said, as a black woman, many times the fight for equal rights for your sex oftentimes will intersect with the fight for equal rights concerning your ethnicity. So the two are not always two separate issues. So anyway, I'm going to be posting this. It is the 12th of February. So I will be posting this today. This Friday, like I said, I'll be doing eclectic weekends. And this weekend will be rock and roll, women in rock and roll. So I'll have to spend my day today doing some research to get that under wraps and everything. So enjoy this post. I've been spending today trying to get my different videos on one video post on WordPress, and the website is acting crazy with me. So once I get that posted, then what I'll be doing throughout the month is every posting about maybe 3 or 4 of the videos in post on WordPress, so that you guys can just go on WordPress. And like I said, I'm going to also post any website information for all of my feminists, so that if you want to order their works, or order any books that they've written, or just subscribe to any blogs that they have, and you want to know more about them, you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, because I have probably 2 to 3 more posts this week to do by this weekend. And I don't want, like I said, I'm trying to keep them under 20 minutes, so that, number one, I don't want to wear out your ears, but also, number two, I kind of want to whet your appetite for more. So if I put it all in this post, I want you to be able, if you're a young person reading this, I want you to have enough hunger for this amount of history. I got told by somebody about one of my other posts that they said this is hidden history. And so I put up, the little question marks, as I was like, okay, what do you mean? And so they said, this is stuff that we're not getting in our schools. So we're not, and the purpose for Black History Month is for you to for those who want to know more about Black people's contribution to American history, this is the month for you to get in there and read it, and not just get the limited stuff that's available in your school's curriculum, but to do a lot of independent and study and research, which I'm a fan of and I like to do. So if you're a young person that's like me and you're curious and you just want to know more about these individuals, feel free to click on, like I said, the links that I'm going to have available for them, so that you can know more about them. Most of them are still alive, so you'll be able, except for the ones that aren't, but so that you can look up more information. If you want to look up information on these on ladies, so that you can use them for reports at school, feel free to. You may even school your teacher, So I like to peak knowledge in young people. If you're at the university level and you want to be able to look at some of these controversial figures like an Angela Davis and see, their viewpoint. Because many people, just like for many of us, myself included, she may be a hero for her fight for equal rights for women, and for the civil rights movement, and for against the prison industrial. You may have a few people who may have heard from people around, she was a troublemaker and this, that, and the other. I remember watching this movie once on HBO during the time of apartheid in South Africa, where these 2 girls were white, one was white and one was black, and how they fell out over a figure named Stephen Biko. So Stephen Biko was a well-known he was against apartheid and fought in favor of disbanding apartheid. well, the white girl had been told, oh, he's a troublemaker, he's this, that, and the other. And I'm like, that's so funny, because we hear that often out of the white supremacist branch about different people in our country that fought for us to have many freedoms that we have now, that had they not protested, had they not fought, had they not been willing to go to jail and go through and suffer all kinds of hardship in order for us, and the fight still continues. It ain't over. The fight still continues, but somebody's making sacrifices. So, like I said before, if anything that if you're listening to anything that I'm putting out here and it's causing you to want to read more and study more and know more and share it with others, feel free. Anyway, this is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and I will be talking to you on the next post. If you don't hear from anything from me, then I will be on the air Friday night. You guys be blessed. Bye-bye. Hello, you have reached the message line for Adam's Rib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.